Oh, I guess we're back.
I guess we're back.
I guess we're back.
I just can't leave you alone, can I?
No, that's it. And, let's get on with the interview with Ethan and myself. We had a lot of fun on this one, so I hope you enjoy it. Well, this week I have an extra special guest because this gentleman, this man, this matador calling person is my co-host to Peace Farm Radio, Ethan Dettenmaier. Mr. Dettenmaier, how are you today in an undisclosed location?
Well, I am fantastic, and one must say that the term extra special can be taken any number of ways, but it does feel like you and I have done some radio in the past here. This feels very familiar. How are you?
Just a little bit. I'm good. I'm good. The reason why we want to talk today, because you've interviewed a lot of different guests. You've interviewed so many people that are in the action genre, directors and actors, and even, you know, you've had singers that and comic book artists and all these different people. So I wanted to get from, you know, your point of view, meeting all these guys, what it was like. And you've also worked at Warner Brothers. What was it like at Warner Brothers when you were doing? What were you doing actually there?
Well, Warner Brothers was an interesting experience because I started off in the mailroom, and then I quickly managed to get a job, basically an internship with director John Milius, who had done Red Dawn, Road Apocalypse Now, Conan the Barbarian. And I kind of volunteered as his step and fetch it at night, which was a fantastic experience. And then I got a job promoted into feature development for a company called Bel Air Entertainment there at the Warner Brothers lot. And they did things like Pay It Forward with Kevin Spacey. I worked on Collateral Damage with Arnold Schwarzenegger. So I had sort of a day job in feature development and a night job with a director on the same lot. And then from there, I got promoted to being the assistant to the president of production at Bel Air. And that was kind of a firsthand eye-opening experience because what you see there is a lot of the political side of movie making. And then so from there, when I ended up doing radio work, which is funny because you and I are technically based at Universal Studios now. So it's interesting to jump from one studio to another. But the radio work we do is out of the Universal backlot. I mean, the experience was just kind of an eye-opening one to how movies are really made. Like, it's not really just about a good idea, as you know, right? It's the political side of it as well. So it was an education.
Did you see a lot of the political side of it? I mean, obviously, putting an action movie together is probably different than putting a romantic comedy together or a drama. Was there, I mean, a difference between what the directors were like or the production was like based on that? I mean, the amount of things that went on?
Well, I wouldn't say I was on a good movie ever. I was on Collateral Damage with Arnold Schwarzenegger, and he was great to work with. In fact, you know, I worked with him and I worked with Keanu Reeves on The Replacements. Those two guys are like my hallmark sort of production combat stories, if you will, and they were both fantastic to work with. Arnold Schwarzenegger, for example, he talks to the guy sweeping up the set the same way he talks to the head of the studio. Like when he talks to the guy, his barista, when he's getting a coffee, the same way he talks to the president of the United States. And that's something you have to love about him. And he's engaging with everyone. In fact, when I first met him, he puts his hand on my shoulder and goes, "You got good shoulders." And then he points at my gut and goes, "But you look like you've been relaxing." You know, I mean, how can you not love the guy, right? It's just so.
You look like you've been relaxing. I love that.
It was so funny. I mean, everything with him was just a big joke. He was a big kid. He was the hardest working guy, but he was a big kid at the same time. I don't know if that answers your question. I'm just kind of drawing on like a personal experience from the Warner Brothers trenches. But I didn't really put together a romantic comedy while I was there. They were trying to do a remake of a film that I was loosely associated with through the production company called, what was it called? It was called something Vacation from Marriage, which was, I think, a Cary Grant film. And that, you know, those movies just aren't as much fun as when you're, I guess, blowing stuff up and doing reshoots with Arnold Schwarzenegger. That's a lot more fun. It was a lot more fun for me anyway. Keanu Reeves was good too, by the way.
Okay, we'll get to Keanu in a second, but I want to stay with Arnold Schwarzenegger for a second. I remember actually Arnold back in when I was whoa, we're talking about 1985. He would just, you know, he'd just come out with Conan the Barbarian, and I was in Las Vegas doing an event. I can't remember what it was I was doing. I was doing the choreography event at the time, and I remember seeing him. And he's beginning to become, you know, the Arnold that we all know. You know. Today is a totally different thing, and everybody makes fun of the man. But yes, you're right. The work ethic he has to have to accomplish anything he does. I mean, as a bodybuilder, you have to have extremely amount of discipline to be
Yes.
able to achieve that. Does he put the same type of discipline into his action sequences and into the stuff that he does on set?
Well, undoubtedly, and it's interesting you harken back to his bodybuilding career, because remember, he got into that before there was really any money doing it, and it was kind of considered. He ran into a lot of opposition when he tried to get into movies because people thought he was too big, and he got jobs like Hercules in New York, and he was considered a joke. And the only thing that kind of broke him was when, actually, oddly enough, my old boss at Warner Brothers, John Milius, decided to bank on him for Conan the Barbarian. If that had not happened, who knows if Arnold Schwarzenegger, the acting machine, would have happened. But as it happened, fate-wise, the opportunity for him to be a bodybuilder and have a name in that business, and also to have the chops enough, and he also took some acting classes along the way, but to have the chops to play Conan the Barbarian was a tremendous break. So it's really, I think, what's interesting. I mean, the one thing I'll say about Arnold, Adrian, and you're a lot like this too, is we would have a whole day of production or work or whatever our responsibilities were, and then you'd go to the Warner Brothers Fitness Center, and Arnold would show up without an entourage and just start working out with you, and whether he knew you or not, and he would just start talking to you. And if you were struggling to lift a dumbbell, he would spot you. He was that kind of a guy. He was that into, like, you're going to improve by lifting, you're going to lift more now.
You can live more now.
Yeah, it was just so inspiring. You couldn't help but be like, this guy, get a load of this guy. Like, he had already done it, and he was still into it and still wanted to see other people improve. And he would always joke with us, be like, when I come back here tomorrow, I want to see you guys 5 pounds lighter.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned about that, because I worked with a gentleman called Alexander Nevsky, who's been on our show before, on our Peace Fund radio show, who is the bodybuilder in Russia, and he was a tall, skinny guy, and Arnold Schwarzenegger was his idol. And he said, the same thing applied. Bodybuilding in Russia didn't exist. It just didn't exist back in the 80s. And that time, and it was really people that started creating the action genre and the bodybuilding genre and those things that people could look up to, that inspired young kids at the time. What do you think it is today that inspires kids? Do you think it's some guy that can scale the walls? Because today the bodybuilders of today are now the free runners of what we see today, and the guys that can do all the tricks and the snowboards and all that stuff. It's a little bit different.
Yeah, it's different for sure. I mean, the people that apply themselves obviously see the light and day, and they have the breakthroughs required to get where they want to go. Thinking back to Arnold and his days doing the Pumping Iron documentary, which a lot of that I think was actually in one form or another scripted. I think that's been revealed now. But to see how hard he worked when there was really no red carpet at the end of the line, like, no one said, if you're going to be a bodybuilder, Arnold, you can get into movies and you can make all this money. Like, that was just the next step he was able to manufacture for himself. I think today, like, kids have, so many other possibilities, like breakthroughs through social media, YouTube and stuff. I don't know what inspires them. I mean, I only know what inspires my own kid, which is trying to be a better human being, which is kind of nice in today's day and age. But it's interesting. I don't know. Arnold told a very interesting story about his days in the Austrian army. Did you have to join the army when you were in England?
No, we didn't have mandatory.
No compulsion?
No.
Yeah, well, he had to join the army, and he tells a very interesting story. He told it on ESPN, where he was inspired by Steve Reeves, who, by the way, it's Steve Reeves' birthday today. Like, he was born in 1923 and he passed away, but Steve Reeves is kind of like the original Mr. Olympia. And so Arnold is inspired by Reeves, and he decides he's going to start working out. And there's not even any weight equipment. Like, there's no way to do it. It's like push-ups and lifting tank parts, right? But he decides he's going to join a competition, like a competition where there's not even a prize money. You probably get a 6-pack of like Austrian Bavarian beer for winning. And he has to sneak off the base to do it. Have you heard this story?
No, I haven't.
Well, this is a great story for anyone listening about motivation. So he sneaks off the base and goes AWOL. He has to jump a train and go into like another town across the border from Austria. He doesn't even have shorts because he doesn't know anything about it. So he checks in, he has no shorts. He has to borrow another competitor's shorts for the stage. And they're all, as he says, pretty grimy. He throws them on. He wins the competition, comes back and gets snagged by the MPs. They catch him for basically desertion, right? He gets brought before the brass in his outfit on the base, and they're ready to throw the book at him, like he's looking at like hard labor for desertion. And he instead, and they start mocking him, like, why did you leave? What was so important to throw your life into the brig, basically? And he says, well, I went to this competition, and like this weightlifting competition, and they all kind of stopped, like they weren't sure what it was, the commanders. And he explains it, and they ask, did you win? And he goes, well, yes, I did win. And then Arnold immediately gives them all the credit. He says, it was because of your teaching and your discipline and the exercises and calisthenics you made me do that I won. And he transforms it into all this thing. So they punish him by putting him in the kitchen patrol, KP, and he starts where he can get an extra steak and stuff. And then they have like the base welders weld like a workout kit for him that they throw on a tank so they can take it on maneuvers. And like, because he gives the base all the credit, he kind of becomes like this driving force for the base, like a marketing key, like, oh, Arnold Schwarzenegger, he's our guy. He won this contest in like, the Hofsbrau of such and such. Anyway, it's just an amazing story about how he was so driven. Like he breaks, he'll tell you all the time, don't break the law, but be prepared to break the rules. And, he's a guy that just went for it.
I think today everybody believes it's an easy road to success. So many kids watch the videos, etc., and they have YouTube followers and all that stuff, but you still have to work to get there. You have to have a determination to do this. I mean, Justin Bieber is a prime example. I mean, the guy was talented, but he decided that this is where he was going to put his effort into creating something where he could put his music online. And I think eventually, if you're smart enough and driven enough, you'll be successful in whatever it is you do. I don't think there's any time that you need to think that you won't make it. I think you have to be realistic, but I think you have to really believe in what you do. And again, you said something very interesting. I think it's adapting to the situation. The situation that Arnold was put in, there was nothing there for it. So he went, well, I'm going to try and change the rules a little bit and become this thing that nobody's heard of before. Right. And I'm going to adapt and see if that works. And it worked extremely well for him, obviously, now, because he's Arnold Schwarzenegger, the icon, so it's a whole different matter.
For me, it's kind of like the equivalent of like, Adrian, if you were going to go out and invent a sport and then become the best at that sport, put that sport on the map for the world, and then leave that sport and become a star. It's like, when you think about that, like the jump he had to make and the drive he had, it's pretty remarkable. But I think the physical fitness side of it, that kind of discipline helped him. I think he knew it was going to be like laying bricks, and he wasn't afraid of it. I mean, most of the greats aren't.
The interesting thing today is that today bodies have changed, especially with the advent of CrossFit. I mean, CrossFit is now about, you talked about them having weights. And today, CrossFit has weights, yes, but it also has a lot of calisthenics, statics, and free movement, so that you have to do things like riding a rope or doing pull-ups or doing things that are just body weight, and the physical portion of the body is changing. And now you have free running, you have the snowboard tricks that all the kids are doing. All this stuff is changing the way that we do things. But if you look at a lot of these kids, what they do, this, my son watches a lot of these roller skating clips on YouTube. Sometimes you see the guy attempting a trick, but he doesn't just attempt it once. He falls over again and again and again and again, and eventually gets it. But that's the only clip you see, is them getting it. Oh, that was an amazing trip. You make it look so easy. But you didn't see the other 55 times you fell over and, maybe broke something in the process.
No.
So I think determination in doing a lot of things is very, very important.
Yeah, it is. And I would, hearkening back to Arnold again, an example he said, I think, was be prepared to do the work. And even do the work you don't even think you need. I remember he took a lot of acting classes. He did not probably need them for Conan the Barbarian or Hercules in New York, where he was actually dubbed. But he took them because he knew it would make him better and more viable down the road. And I think that's something that I think a lot of kids lack today, is they don't bother with stuff. But if you can work to become well-rounded and have sort of a multi-set of skills that you continue to improve and build on, then your opportunities for success will probably broaden out.
What about? I mean, we talked about now. We've gone from the Arnold Schwarzenegger thing to the Keanu Reeves side of it, which is I think a slightly different energy level.